it's a mixture of everything that's happening right here. It's everybody getting together about conversations that people before may have not thought, oh, this person will be talking about this person will be talking about, but then putting it all together, it's like, okay. So nice. Like, oh, I like that one.
Oh, I like that one too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Fits my turban today.
I like that one a lot. I don't know if I have that one.
Oh, the sketches, I like that.
I know. Okay, this one looks like it's going to be obnoxious, but we'll try it.
Okay, so you have
No, I'm not going there again.
Joanna she's tapped into her. This is your more. This is I like this. This is the spirit you.
Joanna's looking very wise.
Yeah, I feel like I come to you for some information.
Oh yes.
How's that for me? Are my eyes alive?
Oh, I like this. It gives it a more classic look. The black one.
Yes.
But I'm supposed to have much bigger eyes. All right, let's keep our interesting eyes. Can I keep this for a while, Benny?
Yeah, let's keep. Okay, so all right, so welcome, welcome Lori, welcome Joanna. I'm grateful to share this space. Got tongue tied. I'm grateful to share this space with you both. I'm grateful to spread knowledge, learn myself, and talk about things about environment. What we're doing here is educating, forming, and being able to create. Not we're just creating solutions, but be able to provide exercises on ways that we can become more active in our environment from each level, whether you think it's minor or major. Every part plays a major part because we're all becoming more aware. So that's what this show is about. And my first question to you both before we get into today's topic, which is about the desertification and really understanding what that is and what it is, why it's happening, who all is involved, and when do we take a step forward to make efforts towards this. But my first question to you is, waking up in the morning, do you eat breakfast first, or do you drink coffee or tea first? What happens first? Or do they happen at the same time?
Well, I started thinking about my coffee the night before. First thing I do when I get out of bed is run downstairs and get the coffee going. So I definitely have to have the coffee. That just like starts the day. And
Okay.
then I may or may not get around to having breakfast.
Okay.
Nice.
Coffee first.
I've kind of not recently, but I've got a routine going now where I drink a glass of water, then I'll have a coffee 10 minutes later, and then I'll have a smoothie for breakfast.
That's healthy.
That's usually the kind of thing.
I like that.
That's good.
Okay.
It was I saw an influencer on Instagram speak about coffee once, and she was like, hydrate before you caffeinate. And that kind of stuck with me. And since then, I've always had my water before my coffee.
Well, interesting. Sometimes while my coffee is brewing, I'll have a glass of orange juice or some water. But I got to get the coffee going. And then, but that's a good thing. Hydrate before you caffeinate. I'm going to remember that.
Okay.
Especially since we're talking about desertification.
Yes.
We're talking about the deserts. So we definitely need to think about hydrating.
Yes. So see, it's little nuggets that I'm going to add. You see, and you catch a nugget. That's exactly the trend right there. Hydrating ourselves before we become a drought. So I wanted to ask, because how do we start ourselves? How do we start our engines? And with this topic right here, it really is about hydrating the planet too. So I'll start it off. This is something that I'm learning about more, and this is something I started learning about when we started the show last year. But then, as I started to catch, when I had time to do more research here and there, learning about what. So I'll allow you, to Lori, to start off today. What is desertification?
Yeah. Okay. Desertification. You're turning something into a desert, basically. Well, okay. So I gave this some thought, and I was trying to think of a simple way to think about this, like you're turning something into a desert. And I think a lot of times people don't worry about it too much. They think, sometimes it's a little dry, sometimes we have too much rain. What's the problem? So here's how I thought about it. You know, if you have a sponge, it gets all dried up and shrunken, but then you put it in water and it's fine. Everything's fine. But in contrast, if you have your favorite cotton t-shirt and you throw it in the dryer and it shrinks, you cannot get it to go back the way it was. So what we're talking about is when big areas of land, you know, like big enough to be an entire nation, when they turn into a desert, it can't just snap back like a sponge. It's more like that favorite t-shirt that has been ruined, like it's shrunk. You cannot stretch it back out. It's like you've ruined it. And so I think that's the difference here, that when these areas get over dry, the soil is ruined, and it's really, it becomes impossible in these huge areas. It becomes impossible to grow anything. You can't get it back. You can't get it back into productive farmland. And that's why it's such a crisis when this happens. Now I can go on and on. So you tell me when I've hit my 2 minutes.
Well, I think that was great. I mean, don't mind going on, because this is something we're learning about. So I think that this is you were right on the head with some points. Now I'm gonna have some other questions to ask you as far as the whys in that, but I'll allow you to go. Joanna, what is it in your eyes, or what have you learned more? What have you learned about it?
I thought Lori, that was a really cool explanation of kind of making it tangible of what it is, because I've never really looked into desertification. I was like, yeah, that's a word I've heard about. I think I kind of know what it means. But then only when I started researching for this episode did I really look into the causes and everything. And one thing is, like, a line that stuck with me was extreme form of land degradation. And land degradation is something I know about because you know, because it's such a huge issue nowadays. And I feel like with issues like these, they're so complex, and then it takes a few steps to understand what it means for your own life. So like desertification comes from land degradation, which comes from monocultures, or comes also from monocultures. There's a few different reasons why it happens, but monocultures is a thing of, you know, that affects the fashion industry, that have massive monocultures of cotton. It affects our food industry because the way, you know, food is being grown at the moment in a lot of places is monocultures, where you just have one of many. So that was kind of how I understood it for myself, and how my life has an impact on land degradation and on desertification in the end.
Wow. Okay. A lot of that was okay. What you both said was a lot of information right there. Good information, great information. So let me ask you this, Joanna, with you learning that, why? Let me ask that first. Make sure. Okay, your Wi-Fi. Why do you see being more of an issue to speak on now?
Sorry, can you say that again? You were breaking up a little bit for me.
Why do you see it being more of an issue to speak on now? What's going on that really see that for you to think that? Why is it an issue that we should speak on now?
Mm-hmm. Well, because when I see headlines like we're losing out on biodiversity, or there's land degradation everywhere, I start to look why that is. And it is because we are degrading our soil, because we're using so many pesticides, and then it has an effect on insects as well. Like, it's all connected. So I've just really wanted to look at the cause of that. And in the end, it comes down to desertification and us trying to produce more, really. In the end, it all comes down to consumption as well. Like, we're trying to produce more of something, And also we've gotten used to, like in terms of the food industry, we've gotten used to having vegetables and fruits of a variety all year round. Like I've recently started ordering an organic veg box, which is seasonal. And my boyfriend and we started complaining. We're like, this is always the same stuff. So we really had to get out of that mindset. Well, that's how it is. When you eat seasonal, it's going to be a lot of the same fruit and vegetable. That's, you're eating with the seasons. So yeah, still a learning process for me as well.
Yeah, and that's why I wanted to ask that question, because it is a learning process. Lori, why are you seeing it, in that response to that question?
Yeah, well, I'm going to take a step back and then I'll answer your question.
Okay.
Sometimes these big issues like, areas becoming a desert, that's what we're trying to say, desertification, it can seem kind of foreign, like, is this really going to happen? It seems like imaginary. But I wanted to bring back and remind everybody that the United States actually has already been through this during the Dust Bowls of the 1930s. So the Dust Bowls are where huge areas out in Midwest and Texas just became, just totally arid, dust. They couldn't grow any crops. So it really exacerbated the Great Depression, and it took years to get out of it. And it ended up, they got lucky. They all of a sudden had a ton of rain, plus the FDR, the president of the United States, implemented a lot of programs to help them. But it was a real phenomenon in the U.S., and there was a book written about it. You may have heard The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck. That was written about this period. It was essentially desertification. They called it the Dust Bowls, but it was the same thing. So it's very real. We've already experienced it. And so there's no reason to feel like it can't happen again. And then, some of the research reports and the estimates from the global, I guess the UN that's looking at this says that it can impact as many as 800 million people. So that is twice the size of the United States. I mean, just trying to put these big numbers in perspective, the US has around 350 million people. So twice the United States would be 700 million. And the estimate is already that, over that 800 million could be chronically food insecure, like don't have enough food. So, it's a really big issue, and why it's an issue now is that we know things are getting hotter. We know there's more demand on resources for food. So that's farming. It's the monocultures where like these, maybe they're only growing corn or they're only growing soybeans or whatever. The monocultures, there's a lot of deforestation in the Amazon. And all of these things are contributing to, the potential for huge areas of land becoming deserts. So we can just see it coming, and it's time to realize that it's a real issue that can impact millions of people.
Wow. That so okay. Let me ask you this then. When did you talk about time period, because history repeats itself, and I'm glad that you brought that up, speaking on the Dust Bowls, because right here in America, and I learned too as we do this series, Joanna, from you, what have you learned too about your area and the different environmental times that you all have had to overcome? When have you seen in your own life this kind of, have you seen affects yourself, like physically going somewhere and seeing a land really change over time? Like, wow, I remember when it was like this.
Well, one example is coming to my mind, which may not be the same thing as that we're talking about, but when I was growing up, we used to play in the sand dunes at the beach. There's these huge sand dunes. They were just so fun to play on, because you could like slide down the sand dune, or you could hide in the sand dunes. And when we were kids, my cousins and I would go and play, and they're gone now. There are no sand dunes.
Oh, that's yeah.
In Emerald Isle Beach in North Carolina, they're just gone. I mean, either they just blew away, or there was development, or sea level rise, or maybe a combination of things. But this really cool thing that we used to play in, they were huge. I mean, you could slide down, and just don't exist anymore. And like in my lifetime, they've disappeared.
Right. Wow. That's something to do more research. Want to do though. What about you, Joanna?
I can't think of anywhere where I've watched desertification happen, really.
Okay.
Yeah, the only thing I've kind of witnessed, which is a symptom of desertification, the biodiversity loss and insect loss. I remember as a kid playing with insects a lot. There was just a lot, and especially in summer, you had bees buzzing around, you had, mosquitoes, you had a variety of insects that you don't have anymore. And yeah, that is also due to monocultures and land degradation and pesticide use. So, but yeah.
Wow. All right. So when you talk about this, like you said earlier, Lori, how when we talk about these big issues, we can kind of get easily lost in who all is involved, who does it impact. So if we look at it on a micro level for our areas, where would you say who all is involved and who all is impacted? And of course, we can always say that everyone is involved and everyone is impacted. But however, when your mind really making shifts and really making changes on who all do you think is involved and who all do you think is more impacted or seeing rather?
Well, I guess it depends on what scope you're looking at. If you're looking at, the Amazon rainforest, for example, and I'll just pick on that because it's, such a big global issue, and it's where a lot of deforestation is happening. So, it's the local government, or Brazil. I mean, so let's start with the president of Brazil. But it's also the companies that are benefiting from the business that's being done there that's leading to the deforestation. It's the banks. I mean, even BlackRock, major asset managers getting a lot of pressure because they're investing in a lot of these companies. So it's depending on where you want to put the pressure point. It's frankly, people eating meat. I mean, I'm a meat eater, but I guess that's contributing to the problem because there's a lot of deforestation happens so that they can make room for cattle. Right. So, I'm not trying to get on a bandwagon about not eating meat, but all these things add up. That's just one example. And that's a huge global example where there's, a sort of a big issue around deforestation. So it depends on the scope. Now, I can bring it back to a much smaller scope, just Charlotte, where I live.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you just bring it back to something that's right out your back door, when there's more and more deforestation. Now, frankly, in Charlotte, believe it or not, where we see the biggest areas of tree decline are in the wealthy neighborhoods. People are tearing out their backyards to put in a swimming pool or to put in a big garage, with a grandmother apartment over the garage. And literally, you can see it on a geospatial map. It's really impacting the tree canopy. So so just to bring it down to a really local level, what that means is then you get a lot more runoff. So when there's big rains, when there's tons of trees in the neighborhood, the rains just kind of, the trees and the ground soak up the rain. But when there's no trees and there's just garages and swimming pools, you just get this huge runoff, which impacts your water quality. It floods out the water system. You need bigger water pipes, literally, to handle because you get flooding, and it leads to water pollution because when you get the flooding into the drain pipes, I mean, that water is carrying everything. Anything you left in your front yard, it's getting picked up and going into the drain, and it pollutes the water. So that's a very local example. And I'm actually in discussions right now with, well, what can we do about that? Are you going to start telling people in these neighborhoods they can't build a pool in their backyard? mean, it's tricky. So how do you get people to see that each of their individual actions is having this big impact? It adds up. So do you get the neighborhood associations to agree on some limits? Do you go to the city council and charge a fee, you know, a no net loss fee for, you know, a no net loss on the tree canopy? I mean, there's a lot of tools that can be used, but you know, they're tricky because people want their freedom. It's their land. They want their freedom to do it, you know, to do as they please. And there's not an easy answer. And there's a concept I want to throw out, but it goes into another topic. So I'll let Joanna speak before I move into another concept I wanted to throw out.
Okay. Yeah, Joanna.
Okay. Yeah, just.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, quick example from the UK, which I've also kind of recently learned about. So there's a lot of peatlands here, and apparently, so you know, there's some sort of nutritious soil that grows there, and apparently this has been used for a lot of plants that people have at home. And obviously during COVID, there's been a massive increase in people getting plants, and yeah, and the soil that they're using for these houseplants actually comes from peatland. So that all leads to land degradation, to loss of biodiversity, because they're taking all of that soil out of that nutritious soil, which is there for a reason. And yeah, and they're taking it all out of there. So it kind of shows that pretty much any decision we make is somehow, you know, linked to something. And sure, on the one hand, it's right now it's all kind of personal responsibility. You have to look into it. I have to now research where does the soil from my houseplants come from. But I think my opinion is that there should be regulation from the top. That's not even that doesn't happen in the first place. Sure, people should have their personal freedoms, but I don't know. I think there's to an extent.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Well, the concept I wanted to throw out has to do with this: where does personal freedom, you know, ultimately hurt everybody? And it's a concept called tragedy of the commons. And it might be something we come back to, you know, from time to time, this idea of tragedy of the commons. And the concept is when individuals act so much in their own self-interest, it becomes contrary to the common good, and there ends up being depletion of resources for everyone. And so a kind of a quick example is if you have a field where your cattle are grazing, and if everybody lets their cattle graze as much as they want and take as much, you know, grass as they want, right, with no regard for the other neighbors that are also trying to graze, eventually the field becomes barren and nobody can feed their cattle. Whereas if they had more coordination and everybody just, you know, put a little bit of boundaries, if they coordinated and maybe rotated or didn't all use to the maximum, they could preserve the field and everybody would have plenty for their cattle. But if people just maximize for their own good, eventually you have no field. So that's called the tragedy of the commons. When, you know, ideally, you know, people would have a little self-restraint and coordinate. So it doesn't have to be through government necessarily. It can be through neighborhood associations or nonprofits. You know, I don't want people to feel like it always goes back to government. That is one tool, but there's other ways that people can come together and coordinate among themselves to, you know, to maximize resources for everyone.
I love how you said that. That was just so in sync, because you're right. It takes this, and that's the two halves that have to come together. Like, it takes some facilitating to get people out of the leadership, to get people out of thinking of, you know, just the tragedy of common. I want that. I wrote it down because I want that to be something we come back to a lot.
Yeah, it's not my idea. That's a big concept that's out there.
No, you're right, but still, that's something we should definitely speak, because that right there is exactly why we are treating the environment the way we are. And to sum it up, what we were talking about, because this is just a sample. This is everything we talk about. Is so many layers. You said earlier about, you know, it's not an easy topic, right? And it's in this time frame, 20-25 minutes, we're not going to be able to, of course, dice it so many ways. However, it's beginning to start the conversation and begin to bring awareness to something that's affecting all of us. So my question to you all, my last question before I bring up our next topic forward in the future, but my last question to you all is, now with us learning about this, when what new ways do you see yourself kind of learning about this new, and what ways what do you see yourself adapting new into to become more environmental friendly and become more environmental aware, environmentally is that the, you know, conscious?
Yeah. I'll start. Yeah, for me, I mean, I'm gonna go back to my recent learning about my fruit and veg box. So
Okay.
I'm learning to be more, you know, to question my consumption and to question the things I got used to. And now we're learning to cook more with a certain vegetable. And I actually like it. You know, a lot of times when something's less convenient, it means you have to get more creative. And I feel like with a lot of the things that you do to be more environmentally friendly, that it requires more creativity of you. You're just trying to make things work. Yeah, and I actually really enjoy that kind of lifestyle. So
yeah, that's great. Gosh, I try to recycle. One thing that I have a lot of leaves in my front yard, and you know, we always put the leaves in a plastic bag, and I've tried to quit using plastic bags and put them in a paper bag, because a paper bag is biodegradable and they're not as easy to find and they're probably more expensive. But I think actually in Charlotte, they're going to start requiring it. I mean, that's like a little thing, but you think about what are they doing? You know, they're trying to compost all the leaves and they've got this plastic bag, or the worker out on the street has to untie the bag. You know, it's just extra work for that person. And you know, somebody's coming by and taking the leaves, the least we can do is put it in a paper bag that is compostable and biodegradable. But I guess, I mean, you know, anything like that, I think it's easy to feel like, it doesn't matter, I'm one person. But it really adds up, you know, everybody, and then you influence your neighbor. So I think you just have to get the mindset that your individual actions do make a difference. And if you want to have a bigger impact, get your friends or your family to do some of the same things, you know, whether it's recycling or, you know, not everybody can go out and plant a tree, but I think you just have to look for opportunities. And that's why we're trying to awareness about some of these issues that maybe didn't even cross your mind before. And now you're aware, so you have to look out for it.
And perfectly said, and even, and definitely Planet Banana. Look at these boxes that she's creating, because these are you posted one, and that was pretty. So you described it here, but I want to make sure people know to go to your page, because these are pretty cool. And this I got it because I want to make sure everybody gets their plug in too, because it's so important that people understand that you all are providing some insight and knowledge. To go collinsclimbs.com, go to, you know, Lori Collins, and go to Joanna and her website, because when it's not, we're taking these moments to talk about things that you all are doing. This is life work as well. So I definitely want to make sure people tune into you on your own platforms that you have, your businesses that you're starting and your work, because it's a mission that's being shown. So my question, just something to think about going into next week, is you brought up the Dust Bowls earlier, and this I said you were in sync, because the theme for next week is thinking ahead. So I want us to take a moment. It doesn't have to be any moment in time in history where in our respective regions where an environmental event happened and it changed society And I want us to be able to describe from what you have learned and what you have seen, what could have been, what are some things that could have prevented or what were learned, how we could have handled that better, what new adaptations had to be taken as far as people and society. You can't use COVID. That's the one. That's my.
How about some hurricanes in North Carolina?
That's a perfect one. That's a perfect one. So being able to take those different times in history and for us to come and talk about it, because I always say if we're able to go back and have some insight and be enlightened, as we can know how to move towards the future. So that's the next topic.
I have lots of ideas on that.
I know.
What's happening in Wilmington? Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Well, did you have any comments or anything that you want to say towards today?
No, what Lori said. I know a beautiful quote. It's like, it's only one straw, said 8 billion people. It shows how every action is actually, making a difference in the end.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay. Well, thank you.
All right.
I'll see you all next week. And
all right.
Till then, enjoy the rest
See
of
you
your
next
week.
week.
Hasta luego. Okay.
Bye.
Bye.